Hi, I'm Julie Hanson from Just Do Property. I'm here today with John Davies from Hedge Property Group, who also runs the LHA network. Funny enough, we're going to talk about LHA.
A great subject.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And funny enough, John, I was reading the other day.
Not again.
I like reading. The DWP stats, the Department of Work and Pension, shows...
A great site, yes.
Yeah. In December 2009,
yes,
4.61 million people were claiming housing benefit. That's a huge number, isn't it?
It certainly is.
That's
and
massive.
It's far more than it should be, but aren't.
Yeah.
The numbers probably are in excess of 5.5, nearly 6 million right now of people who are eligible for housing benefit, or LHA payments as they're now called.
Yeah.
And for most commentators, they believe that market is only going to get worse.
Right.
So worse for the government, worse for the taxpayer.
Yes.
Probably good news for the private landlord. Because as you're probably aware, if you have been reading all the various stats and anything else, that unfortunately there hasn't been much housing building going on lately. So therefore, if you just take the sort of simple economics of less house building, more unemployment, greater population growth, leads to one thing only, which is a greater demand on the service itself.
So there's a big shortage of housing then?
Huge shortage. Now again, we've got to get past all of the hype that politicians come up with, saying, oh, it's the fault of the right to buy scheme and so forth, because I would argue back, well, the people who bought the houses and the right to buy were council tenants. So if they hadn't had that right, they'd still be council tenants.
Yes.
So therefore, how's that going to solve the
Still have
problem?
to house them. Yes. Yes.
So therefore, again, you have to go past the headlines to look at the real truth. Fact of the matter is, more and more people are in receipt of benefits and require social housing as a result. And again, without being too controversial, there has been a large influx of people outside of the UK coming to work in the UK. Well, they're taking the jobs of the people who could be doing them, and therefore we have a problem. So,
yes.
I mean, Ian Denker-Smith has now suggested that he's going to make some pretty big changes. We shall see, because again we have the usual hot air. Just a question of, are those true sort of promises going to come to fruition? So, realistically, how are they going to cut those numbers of people in receipt? How are they going to move the paperwork, for the want of a better word?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you think it's a good investment strategy for an investor?
Well, I said we've got two things. For the taxpayer, not such good news. For the property investor, for the landlord, then it could be good news. It could be good news because if you set your stall out to actually address the requirements of the people who are in receipt of LHA payment, then there is a very healthy business to be done. But unfortunately, again, most landlords do not spend the time and effort to educate themselves on how the market really operates, tend to give everybody the same image of who might be an LHA tenant, and therefore they tend to avoid that market.
Well, I've read recently, John, according to the NLA, 52% of landlords say they wouldn't let to LHA tenants. So a lot of landlords are a bit scared, aren't they, and worried about the hassle.
Absolutely. Well, 52% is more than half.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, and that's the ones who were, and that's the ones that didn't reach either. And again, another article from the NLA once said, with the last person leaving the social housing sector, please turn on the light, because of the changes that were made back in 2008, and those changes where the tenant got paid directly as opposed to the landlord. There's a whole bunch of changes that were made, but of course, again, not all, but many landlords don't want to go and find out what the changes really are and tend to actually fight against County Hall as opposed to trying to find out how can I work with County Hall. As the LHA network, as you're probably aware, we've spent since the inception of LHA payments a huge amount of time and effort and research meeting and speaking with the right people from the Department of Work and Pensions, from housing benefit, from housing benefit officers, the advisors to those people as well, getting to understand specifically what the market requires and how to actually operate within the market. Like Duncan Bannatyne, in his book, probably encapsulated this the best when he said, well, when doing a sort of analysis worked out that for any particular room he could receive X amount of rent, and it was the government who paid the rent. And there's a good saying that in a time of recession, make the government your customer. Because you're always going to get paid.
Yes.
But you've got to work out how you're going to get paid, but you will always get paid.
So with the nursing homes he did that, was it?
That's correct.
Yes, yes.
But of course, still comes under the remit of social care. So again, it's a huge industry that people only get to see the tip off. Everybody's image of social housing, you know, is from the Little Britain's character.
Yes, Vicky Pollard.
Vicky Pollard.
Yes.
That's everybody's image of the LHA client, you know, sort of one pram and about 8 babies with all with different surnames, you know, so that's the image of it. But it's not the way it is. And of course, therefore, if you just go beyond the surface and look somewhat deeper, you are sitting in front of a marketplace that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a critical housing shortage, so you have huge demand. So it must make sense to learn how to actually maximise the return on that. Now, there is so many regulations and legislation that's set out. So whenever you have regulation and legislation, there are always gaps. And therefore there are always niche areas where if you specialise in those niche areas, you will make well above average returns. And that's what the LHA network does, is show people how to get those returns. Typically, we would probably receive rent between 30 and 40% higher than a standard AST on a property. And that's not a HMO, that's a standard property, receive 50% more money with a waiting list of tenants with guaranteed payment.
That's very attractive.
It is, because because that's what you're in the business of.
Yes.
I mean, without doing maths, you know, to a high level, if you have 10 properties and you've got £3,000 or £4,000 more per property coming through the door, that's £40,000 per annum. That's £40,000 for not doing anything different than what you have to do now, which is to acquire the property and let the property.
Makes sense, yeah. So how does social housing differ from LHA? The sort of traditional LHA letting.
Right, okay, well again, we're going too deep on this particular subject. You have housing benefit. Okay, and then you have LHA payments. Then you have such things as exempt housing or supported housing. So there's quite a number of different areas sitting within the gambit of social housing. There's also support in the community, getting people out of homes into the community. So as I said, it's not just one little part of that.
Right.
But ostensibly, people who are looking for new tenancies in the main would be therefore under the LHA payment system. Look, therefore, they would normally receive the monies themselves and then pay it to the landlord. People prior to 2008 would normally be on housing benefit. Those people who have vulnerable tendencies may require what's called floating support, and therefore then you're supporting them as well, which is outside of the LHA, but then fits under part of the housing benefit rules.
Right.
So it's like quite complex.
It's very complicated,
Absolutely,
isn't it?
right.
Yes.
But again, like all things, it is complicated to the person who hasn't spent all their time researching this. We've now been doing this for well over 2 years and employ 2 full-time consultants, and again people who actually are barristers and solicitors who specialise in social security payments and so forth, and it's having that expertise around you that allows you to find there is a particular segment or market, and that's what you need to do to help that particular sector. And again, for an example, as we know, there are victims of family abuse and domestic violence and so forth. It's these people do suffer trauma, so therefore we need to find ways to help those people as well, and they can't just rely upon charity.
No, absolutely.
So again, I'm just giving you an example of areas that within social housing there are gaps and there are requirements that need helping. And for us as an organisation, so of course we obviously let our own properties into that sector, there's a win-win situation as well. We take the problem away from the government, we help people, we put them in proper housing, they have a new start in their lives, so therefore they win as well. We get paid, and we get paid above average for a standard let, so therefore everybody wins.
Yes.
And if we keep doing that, that can only help society move forward.
It's a win-win situation for everybody, really, isn't it?
Absolutely right.
Yeah,
yes.
That's great. Great stuff. Well, we'll leave it there.
Okay.
Great. So thank you very much, John.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.